Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, wait, those are mine. Good morning, Chief Nelson. I do not see.
Good morning. I believe Commissioner Esposito said she was not able to attend today.
Okay, I don't see Commissioners Coy or Reed just yet either. But to be respectful of everyone's time, I'll give them another 30 to 60 seconds.
Good morning, Commissioner Roberts. This is Chief Jones.
Good morning, Chief Jones. Good morning, Chief. Chief. Good morning, Commissioner Reed.
Thanks for the promotion.
I think I see Commissioner Coy too.
So who are the members of this committee?
It is Commissioner Coy, Commissioner Esposito, Commissioner Reed, and myself.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right, let's get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the May 16th Operations Committee meeting. To my colleagues, I ask that you hold your questions, remarks, comments, reflective pieces until the end of each respective presentation to allow for the full presentation. And to my presenters today, I ask that you create space for commissioners to ask questions at the end. With that, let's get started with our comprehensive educational facility master plan presentation. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Gershberg. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning, and I'll be presenting our CEFMP today. Let me pull it up. All right, are folks able to see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. So today we're going over the 2023 Comprehensive Educational Facilities Master Plan, also known as the CEFMP. This aligns with Board Priority 3. City schools will have high-quality, modernized facilities and resources that support the success of students, educators, administrators, and staff. So in January of 2022, as the annual review recommendations were being wrapped up, Commissioner Roberts, you had requested that there be a public document that addressed a lot of the data points included within annual review. And we met with you afterwards to go over it, but we actually do include a lot of that information in the CEFMP. And so we do that every single year. And I'll be going over how those data points are tracked within the CEFMP and how it fits within the larger district context. And additionally, Commissioner Esposito recently raised your motion, asked about it. And so we can also share this with her when she is available. So the CEFMP, it's a document that we have to provide to the state every year, July 1st. All LEAs provide it. And in there is the information that you saw on the previous slide. And so planning department, we collect data from all the different departments within city schools, but then also data at a larger context. So we work with Baltimore City Planning, we pull census data, we pull all this together. We include it as documentation, but we also do a lot of analysis on it to then help inform decisions that the district makes. And so while the CEFMP is a snapshot of a lot of that analysis and those data points that are collected, ultimately we use it and all of the work that goes into it throughout the year to better inform the district. And then ultimately we know that when we make decisions, there are outcomes. And so it's a constant cycle of looking at data, seeing the outcome, and then making sure that we're incorporating any lessons learned or accounting for different circumstances. Let's talk about enrollment trends and demographics first. People are having less kids. This is a nationwide trend, and we are absolutely seeing it in Baltimore City as well. The amount of kindergartners the percent of kindergartners that we see as part of the birth cohort 5 years earlier, that percent has been relatively stable, but in general, the overall number of kids that are there is less. As I'm sure people are aware, Baltimore City's population is decreasing. Between 2010 and 2020 census, we lost about 6% of our population. And even in the past 2 years since the census, we've lost an additional almost 15,000 people. When we look at the breakdown of that from a demographic standpoint, we see we've lost a lot of our Black population, even though we've had a significant gains within the Latino population. And while people often look at the percents, you'll see, oh, that's 77% growth. That's great. But when you look at the raw numbers, if we've lost almost 60,000 of our Black citizens in Baltimore City, as you can see, that outweighs the gain of 20,000 in our Latino population. If we look at city schools demographics, that also the changes at the city level are definitely mirrored within our school population. So there's an increasing Latino population, but not enough to offset the Black losses. The chart here shows it as percentages. So keep in mind, while there's been that demographic shift you can see the increasing yellow that represents the Latino population, and the gray represents the Black population. Even though that change is occurring, there's been a net loss of over 7,000 students since SY 15-16. So those gains are just not enough to keep up with the losses. For the CEFMP, we have to produce 10-year enrollment projections. That's required by the state. So here you can see historical enrollment and then what we're projecting out. We anticipate a loss of additional 7,000 students over the next 10 years. When we look at our populations, we look at not just the schools they're attending, because we know people go all over. We also look at where they live, and we track how those are changing, how those numbers change over time. So here you can see the difference between SY 15-16 and this past school year, and you see that there are huge losses, primarily in West Baltimore, but also in East Baltimore now. And then the slight gains that we have in the South and the Southeast just are not enough to outweigh the losses. We often get the question of, well, are all of our students just choosing to go to private school? Not necessarily. And actually, the current non-public enrollment is the lowest it's been since 2016. It's just that the overall pot of students that are available is significantly less than what it was in past years. Let's talk about utilization next. That's a very important word that we use many times throughout the CEFMP. And part of that dates back to the 2013 MOU that we signed with the city and MSA to get the 21st Century Building Funds. In there, we committed to getting a district-wide utilization rate of 86%. And we also committed to surplusing a certain number of buildings. So utilization is calculated by taking enrollment of a school, of a building, and divided by the state rated capacity, the SRC. The SRC is the COMA regulation on how you measure the number of seats in a building. And while it's not perfect, it does give us a ballpark on the amount of space. So how does utilization impact our capital investments? So if you remember from the CIP presentation back in the fall, and then the update that you guys will see soon, we have systemic projects, which are HVAC, windows, roofs, and then we have major projects like additions and brand new buildings. So for systemic projects, the state requires that a building's utilization be at least 60% for us to be able to do a systemic project. So if a building is projected to be at 57% 7 years out, we can't put that new roof on. We can't put that new HVAC system in. So it has a pretty large impact, especially on a district where we struggle with utilization. With major projects, it can also have an impact. We might say we need more seats at this school. It's severely overcrowded. And the state might say, well, you've got a low utilized building right next to it. You should just rezone. And so it's hard for us to justify that new building when we have adjacent underutilized schools. So then you might say, well, why can't city schools just fund the project without state funds so we don't have to deal with the regulations as much? Our jurisdiction is heavily dependent upon the state for funding for capital projects. 96 to 100% of our funding comes from the state. And so a wealthier jurisdiction might have a lot more money that they can just say, okay, the state requires this, we'll cover the balance. We got this. We have less money to do that. And therefore we're subject to the state's regulations a lot more than, say, a wealthier jurisdiction. So utilization impacts a lot. Our current utilization is 86%, which was the target for 1920, which we had met and exceeded. 86% is a good rule of thumb. It makes sure that you're utilizing a building well, but it gives a little room for any future growth. You'll see, though, in the out years, especially as our enrollment is slated to decrease, so is our utilization. The 84% that we're showing here is the benchmark for the end of the first phase of the 21st Century Buildings project. And so we always look at that as kind of, all right, we finished that initial pot of money, and we kind of see how far we've come for our utilization. When we look at utilization, we break it out by building type. We know seats at a high school are a lot different than seats in an elementary school. You have science labs, CTE labs versus pre-K classrooms that might have bathrooms in there. So they're very different. And so we break them out this way. Our secondary buildings take up about 40% of our portfolio, with 60% at the elementary and elementary middle level. So if you remember on the several slides ago, I said that we're at 86% this year. And while we're meeting that good rule of thumb, when you break it out by grade band, it's not actually as ideal. You see at the elementary middle level, we're short over 5,000 seats, but at the middle high and high level, we have almost 3,000 seats that in excess. So it's on paper, we look okay when we have a district-wide 86, but we know on the ground we're struggling a little bit. We have surplused over 2.7 million square feet, or we have surplus 2.7 million square feet since the start of the 21st Century Buildings program. And as I said, that's part of our commitment that we made to get the money. And we've actually surplused more buildings in addition to the requirement, just as the annual review occurs every year and we surplus facilities that are no longer needed. Let's talk about school zones and feeders, because I know that's come up specifically. It's very difficult to plan in Baltimore City. In a traditional jurisdiction, you have a set zone where you attend a specific elementary school, a middle school, and then a high school. The zones typically get larger as you progress. In Baltimore City, about almost half of our K to 5th graders are attending a school that is not their zone school. Of that 47%, about half of them might be attending a charter school, a separate public day school. They might be homeless. They might be attending an EL program or attending a citywide program. But the other half of that, those are just students who are attending a zone school that is not their zone school. And so it can be very difficult to plan for the number of seats needed, or even looking at it from the other perspective, like, oh, maybe we don't need these seats because the building is maybe half empty. It's difficult because we know things can change on a dime. Several years ago, we had a charter that closed Inner Harbor Academy. And then the next year, City Springs had almost 400 additional students. Well, I know that situation doesn't happen often. We also know that new buildings open up can all of a sudden be a draw. And it's not like we're adding more students to the city. It's just that the students are relocating. And so with so much movement among our enrollments, it's difficult to plan. And then obviously middle and high school choice means that kids are going all over. So I might see a certain amount of growth in a part of the city. We can't necessarily say 100% that the students are going to be attending the schools in that part of the city. People often ask, well, what about development? There's a new apartment complex coming in. I think it's going to bring in 300 kids. And we actually have a calculator that we've developed. It looks at the area that the development is in, and it looks at the type of housing. Is it apartments? Is it single family homes? Is it rented versus owned? And so we do run developments through our calculator to determine how much the yield might be. An example on North Calvert Street was a 346 unit apartment building. We thought it would yield 16 students, and it actually only even yielded 6. So we can't say that just because a new development is coming in, that it's going to be bringing more students to that local school. First off, we know that Baltimore's population is decreasing. And so if anything, it would just be students relocating from another part of Baltimore to that area, or it might even be students in that same neighborhood just relocating. We really don't, we're at a point right now where the majority of the developments coming online, they're not impacting the number of seats that we need significantly. Even the purple circle in here, which indicates the largest development, that's just Perkins. And so a lot of the students that were there have been relocated out while that development happens, and then they're coming back. We anticipate there'll be a slight gain there, but in general, it's not, when you look at the current number of seats available, it's not dramatically different. We often look at the amount of money that we can put into our buildings in combination with maintenance. And since we are subject to the state for so much of the majority of our capital funding, and just even in general, the amount of funds that we have are, again, the strings are very tight. When you look at the number of buildings we have and their age and condition, for what we would need to properly maintain our buildings, we have an annual deficit of $243 million. And while we talk about more of that in the CIP PowerPoint and the CMP PowerPoint, I just wanted to flag it here. We look at facility conditions and investments, absolutely. In the annual review, we will pull out the different building scores, kind of the investments that have happened, but just in general, we don't have the amount of money needed for what we currently have. And so we always have to keep that in the back of our mind. We have made significant gains in providing more 21st century teaching spaces to our students as more buildings come online. You can see we're at about 26% for this school year, and it's slated to increase as more buildings and the Built to Learn buildings come online. And this year for even the CIP, we have, in terms of investments, about 46 million. And then also with Healthy Schools Fund, an additional 48 million. As I said previously, the CEFMP data and analysis that we do guides and supports a lot of district efforts. Examples of that include the annual review, projects requiring capital funding, programmatic movements, and long-term CTE plans. We pull a lot of data, we run analysis, and then working with those specific departments and any kind of regulations that might impact that, we help to develop the supporting documents that ultimately then will support, go towards those recommendations. A specific example of that is the proposed surplus of the South Side building that I believe was in this most recent annual review. So we pulled new era student population densities, walking distances, enrollment trends, the SRC, investments that we had made in the building, residential developments, and census information. And we included that in all the initial work that went into what that final recommendation was. So we started the presentation with this graphic, and I want to end with it just to emphasize that, again, while it's a snapshot, it's a static document that we do submit to the state. Ultimately, a lot of the analysis and the data points that we collect in there go on to inform district decisions. Any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll open the floor. Commissioner Reed, any questions or remarks?
Great job and welcome, Maureen. I guess one thing that registers with me is, well, it was really pretty comprehensive. Thank you. When you said it's difficult to plan. So in terms of future demographics, if we're going below the waterline in terms of 86 going forward, 86% capacity, we're losing students. But like you said, the flip side is we don't know, based on that 47%, how they get to the schools.
We know about half of that will go to specialized program, but the other half of that, it's student mobility. It's students exercising their choice. Yeah.
So we look at future demographics in terms of building sites, projections, closures. How daunting is the task? And so we can't stay ahead of the curve, right?
It's difficult. We know that there's definitely some trends. We know our EL students, our English learners, we know they typically do attend their neighborhood schools. We know that. We know sometimes that a brand new school can have a new school effect. Sometimes, not always, sometimes. So we take the bits of information that we do know sometimes, and other times it is a bit of a gamble. Yeah.
And that part in West Baltimore was Big Red.
Mhm.
What's that mean to the schools in that area?
The city used to have a lot more students. We know this. We were, our city, I think at one point almost had 1 million residents. West Baltimore is still one of our densest communities. So while it has a lot of students there, as you saw, it has a lot of loss. And so with all of that loss, there's a lot of buildings in that part of the city that have a low utilization rate. Actually, let me pull up another map I have in my appendix.
Okay.
I was gonna highlight that.
All right, so this is this is a map of zones of elementary and elementary middle. And you can see there's a lot of blue in West Baltimore between here and here. There's
Right.
a lot of small schools there with a lot of empty seats. Sometimes they have programs that are very undersized. And these are some of the factors that are considered when we look at the annual review at the district as a whole. If we're having to put a lot of money into an old building to keep it running because we can't get the state to do it because it's not utilized enough, that's a lot more funding that's coming directly from the district. It's a lot more for us to maintain. So I think it's part of us looking at our resources and making sure that we're approaching the district's facilities in a way that we're being equitable, but then also making sure that we're being as responsible as possible.
All right.
We
Thank
know
you.
that there's,
Thank you.
Commissioner Coyle?
Yeah, two questions. One is building on Commissioner Reed's question. I know the district will often work with Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance from the Jacob France Institute for neighborhood indicators. Could you describe some of the benefits in your planning process from the work of BINYA and any ways that you would like to see, I guess, more insight from what they are doing to feed into your modeling, which, you know, as Commissioner Reed is saying, is daunting, but thank you for how comprehensive and what you described here and shown for how you all are approaching this work?
Yes, so I didn't include it here, but we have something called the Community Conditions Index. And that's basically, we've taken a number of factors like median home value, I think crime, several factors. We have a whole section, actually, Chapter 7 within our CEF&P where we cover that. And so those factors are, BINIA aggregates them to the CSA level. And so we use BINIA's aggregated data to develop our CCI that we're updating. Another way that it overlaps is actually, I mentioned the student yield calculator. The one we have right now is a little bit old, so we're actually working with BINIA to develop an updated calculator. So they're definitely a resource and a partner that we work with.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight and sharing that. As it relates to the state MOU that was referenced, what is when does that expire? What is the process if there was to be a renegotiation of that agreement? I mean, I guess help me understand what some of the timeline is of that previous decision and when there might be a future revisitation of it.
So the
Well,
initial,
oh no, I just saw Chief Washington pop on. I didn't know who was going to take it first.
I'll give a little bit of information, then I think
Mhm.
Lynette can deal with the stickier stuff. So the initial deadline for us kind of ending the 21st Century Buildings Plan, it was SY 1920. Timing changed. Construction projects took a lot longer. And then, as you know, with the Build to Learn projects, we ended up needing some of the buildings that we were supposed to surplus because we need it for swing space. So like Northwestern, Thurgood, we ended up needing them a lot longer, even though the initial plan called for us to surplus them. And so it's a little bit of a gray area in terms of like a hard stop. There was a district-wide utilization requirement for 1920, and we did meet that. But in terms of fulfilling every single checkbox, we are still in the process of doing that. Lynette can speak to further discussions.
And one of the things I think that is important is the intent of the requirement on the beginning. So the intent of the requirement was because the state was giving us money to invest in new schools and they didn't want to give us money to invest in new schools that were going to be underutilized, right? And so at that period of time between where the period began into where we are now, we're coming to the end of the 21st Century Building Program. And it's very difficult for us to then agree to continue a utilization rate when you don't have a lot more funding, right? So if we're closing schools, it means that we are building new schools to consolidate. And that was the whole intent of the whole utilization, was that they wanted us to close schools and fix our district-wide utilization so that they would give us money to invest in these new infrastructure. But there's no new money. We have the high school investment for the Build to Learn, and it's only addressing a small number of high schools. It's not a significant number as it was with the initial one. We have approached the state about the renegotiating because, as it is, the board, the school board, the commissioners, they signed on to a particular time period and a date, and that time period has expired. And so I think that unless the IAC comes back and press on us again to say, hey, we are looking at our investments in the district based off of a utilization rate, then I would say that the district then need to say we need to renegotiate that, given where we are with our projections for enrollment and all of the other different variables. Also, the money to invest in new infrastructure, because even though we have small schools that are underutilized, those schools have a footprint and they only are so big. So if we were to close another school, in order for them to accept any additional students from another closing school, there would have to be some kind of infrastructure investments. And right now, there's no other significant infrastructure investments that's out there outside of the Build to Learn.
I appreciate that, and knowing those details, I can see the history and in what is sort of the long tail as some of these projects are being sort of fully played through. But I appreciate knowing that there is not current that is not a current requirement as the funding has been already allocated. That makes more sense to me now, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
And one of the things I just do want to add is that at a individual building by building level, that utilization rate is something that is still being held by the state. So if we wanted to go and invest in a building, let's say an air conditioning project, the state will consider the utilization of that particular building.
Commissioner Corey, was that it for you?
Yep. Working to
Okay, I
limit my
just-
questions.
Got it. I think I just have one question, but I wanted to first give kudos to the team for this overview. It's very comprehensive. It's very targeted. Portfolio management is very challenging because of all the intricacies that it encompasses. And so in highlighting to, my colleagues on the committee and to my other colleagues, I'm probably one of the biggest advocates for pushing, trying to understand all of the moving pieces that influence the portfolio. It's a moving target. There is no best practice, if you will. Like there's no rule book for how to do this with so many moving variables. And so to the team, thank you for pulling this together and for the materials, especially that are in the appendix. I think my only question that kind of hasn't been covered here is around contract and charter schools with so many variables within our traditional considerations. And as a board member and as a collective body that has to consider and has to evaluate our contract and charter schools, how does this help, or how is the system considering where we need to stand up additional or pull back on contract and charter schools? That I think that's the only element, right? That's like a variable that hasn't been touched on. Angela, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yep. And so when we're considering like new applications for schools, one of the big things that applicants have to show that they're meeting a key district need. And so one of the things we point applicants to is the CEF&P to understand, where we have lost population, where we have maybe closed schools, as well as where we need, like where we have a growing population to help inform that process. And then we are considering that when we're looking at the application as one of the things in context. Is it really meeting a critical need? Or are they proposing to be in a place where, we don't, there's not enough students to sustain it? And that's particularly important because we've even with our more recent school openings, some of them with strong operators have struggled to get to reach their the caps that they've set just because of the changing dynamics in the city. So
I appreciate that. And I know this year we didn't have any new submissions for any contract or charter schools. And in previous years, we had, maybe one or two submissions. But Angela, could you just speak to really quickly that there are priority areas that are priorities of addressing choice options for students in the district as it relates to new concept schools?
yeah, right now our highest priorities that we've set that represent the board's priorities and district's priorities are actually conversions. It's not for brand new school ideas, in part because of this population loss that we're seeing. And we have a need for school improvement. We see operators as a key lever to school improvement. And so that's the area where we put focus. I think we're still open to considering applications for new school ideas, but they have to really show they're meeting a compelling district need, and that they'll actually be able to attract students in a way that's sustainable and helpful to the system.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you so much to the team for today's presentation.
Thank you.
We can transition to the next presentation, our employee evaluation update. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm going to pull up my screen and good morning, commissioners. My name is Jessie Papia. I'm the Director of Employee Effectiveness, and I'll be providing our update to the board on employee evaluations. Please let me know if you can't see the slides okay, but I'll be clicking through this way. Okay. So to jump into it, and again, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide you this update on our employee evaluation work in the district. As a quick reminder, Board Policy GCO outlines our district's stance around employee evaluations. And at the crux of it, when we think about how we are evaluating our staff to reinforce the leadership role that they play, making sure that we're connecting these authentic assessments of performance and of impact with opportunities for performance management that would drive improvement for staff, connecting with career growth opportunities. You see those reflected and connected with Board Priority 1 and Board Priority 2. In terms of the ARC for today's presentation, there are some things I wanted to quickly touch on in terms of how we are maintaining particular implementation experiences. These include just the maintenance of a supervisor overview of evaluations based on feedback that we received in the past, the maintenance of an off-cycle teacher evaluation experience. Again, this was driven by feedback in public sessions that we co-facilitated with the Baltimore Teachers Union. And then the maintenance of an unannounced formal observation in the spring. I'm really excited to share some of the ways in which we are expanding our support for qualified observers in the district. And then wanted to signal to the board some really exciting shifts that are coming up around employee evaluations. And so a lot of text here, we wanted to make sure folks had this and folks were reading the materials on their own, they understood what was going on. But at the core of the supervisor overview for evaluations was us responding to feedback where folks said that when there was clear communication about expectations and about goals, people felt more ready for the year and had more positive feedback on their evaluation experiences. And so we have provided materials to supervisors across the district, both those in district office and those who are school-based, where they can modify the materials, but it gives them the information so they can overview, why people are evaluated, making sure that's really clear to folks, making sure people understand how they will be evaluated, and that includes some technical steps, navigating systems, understanding different rubrics that are in play. And then making sure that employees have the information so that they know what the overarching goals and priorities for the team or for the work are, and they can connect their own personal goals to those overarching priorities. And we share these materials so they can be reviewed in conjunction with or prior to the initial planning conferences and individual development plans that are created in the beginning of the year. And I'd say generally, we're talking about the end of October is when we'd want all those to be completed. So a way to help really people start off the year on the right start. We've continued based on positive things that we heard, sharing these materials with folks. The other thing I wanted to name is it's actually kind of exciting and new to be able to say after several years that there is some consistency in our evaluations, in particular when we think about how our formal observations for classroom teachers are conducted. This is an area of work where my team supports the evaluation design implementation for all staff in the district. And knowing what research shows about the impact of teachers on student learning, the impact of school leaders on school communities and their success, those have certainly been two employee groups which we've prioritized and focused a lot of our attention resources on. And a lot of work over the last several years has been around our formal observations, including reviewing some updates to the rubric language, gathering feedback on that, implementing that for stakes in the midst of the shifts to virtual teaching and learning driven by the COVID pandemic. And so they need to make sure we're developing and promoting additional resources to help folks understand how to apply the expectations of the rubric in a more of a remote learning experience. And then as we're shifting and transitioning back into physical school buildings, implementing unannounced formal observations, which had been a piece of big discussion when the board had originally approved the policy GCO in school year 2019-20. And we delayed the implementation while folks were remote for COVID. And so we implemented last year for SIGs and implemented again this year. And so this year was actually, again, the space of more consistency. You know, we weren't piloting the off-cycle evaluation. Instead, it was in place, you know, for another year. People were getting more used to what to expect. We were entering our second year of the unannounced formal observations. And again, we'd had our updated language for the instructional framework rubric in place for a couple of years now. One thing I'll name is, like, throughout these transitions, making sure being very deliberate about the resources that we had available for folks. We were monitoring data at a district level, and we continued to see the majority of teachers earning high ratings on the indicators of the formal observation rubric. So even as there were shifts, we didn't see some stark plummet in folks' ratings that might make us think that something external was going on, or something about these the surrounding circumstances were significantly changing the data. And instead, we were seeing the data was quite sticky, and we were seeing lots of consistency. A couple things I just want to highlight to folks, because I said some terms and it might not be something people live and breathe every day. So just wanted to say something again that we had maintained was the implementation of an off-cycle teacher evaluation. In that, we lean into some of the allowances in COMAR, where teachers are able to carry forward their professional practice data from a previous year into their current year's annual evaluation. What it means is that for our folks who meet particular criteria, including consistent high performance and having tenure, they are able to choose. You know, they're eligible, and it is their choice if they would like to kind of step away from having formal observations or professional expectations ratings for the year, and instead carry forward their scores from the previous year. We are in a district, and the way we implement this is that we go kind of like a 1 year on, 1 year off opportunity for those who are eligible. And we had over 690 teachers confirm that they would be interested, and they participated in the off-cycle experience this year. We heard very positive feedback on this after our pilot. We implemented, continue to hear good things. Folks would like there to be even more of this, as how much they appreciate it. And we hope that this is a way to acknowledge high performance from our teachers who are consistent in that work, and also as a way to hopefully free up some capacity for school leaders to increase the informal observations that they're doing with other teachers who might benefit from more regular touch points. Another thing which we implemented, and again, this consistency, change is very confusing and can be scary for folks. And so we're navigating change a lot as a system. So I'm very excited, that there's, again, this place of consistency for folks. And that includes unannounced formal observations in the spring window. So we are a district in a system where we now have announced formal observations. The first one in the year is announced, which means the teacher knows when the observer is coming. They have a pre-observation conversation to prepare for that observation. Performance data is gathered and they are rated. Other formal observations that occur during the spring window are unannounced, which means their teacher is not informed of the day and time when the observer would come in, right? We just want to see kind of on any given day, how are things going with our kids? And there's no pre-observation conference to plan, the lesson or discuss in that way. So certainly the post-observation conference is really critical. The teachers are rated on their performance, and that becomes part of their evaluation. We have some things in a little bit more clarity, I would say, in our administrative regulation based on the amount of feedback that we received several years ago when making and talking about this shift. So teachers will be informed it is their formal observation before performance data is gathered. We have pieces in place where the expectation is this is not the first time they've been observed for that year. So they've gotten feedback before, they've been observed before. There's going to be understanding of their classroom context, including the fact that the observer doing the unannounced formal has to have been in their classroom, formally or informally, earlier that year. And always the intent is to have an authentic view of the teacher's practice. Another thing we just want to name is, again, as we're monitoring our data, despite significant concerns from some of our stakeholders, we continue to see high ratings for teachers. So those are some of the things that have remained the same. So some consistency that we wanted to highlight for the board here and for the public. What I'm really excited to share are some of the ways in which we're expanding and growing. And this includes the way we're supporting qualified observers in city schools. So a qualified observer is someone who is able to conduct a formal observation of a teacher level certificated staff member as part of their evaluation. We have always, as a district, going back to when, prior to my being in this role back in like 2011, where we kind of calibrated the entire system. That included, training around the rubric about good practices for being an observer, and then assessing people on their accuracy using a true scored video of practice, and then seeing how accurate a match the ratings are that our own observers give on that same video. And then after we said folks were qualified observers, we really didn't have the resources or the capacity to bring them back and to train again or to kind of re-norm. Instead, we focused our capacity around that same kind of learning experience and calibration assessment for new observers. What I'm really excited to say, what this slide is kind of trying to show is a little bit of a journey here, is that with the shift in the updated language in our instructional framework rubric, we kind of focused our support on our previously calibrated observers, made sure we were training and calibrating our new observers, and then we piloted last year what is now in place for the first time, where we will continue the calibration and instructional leadership for our observers. And what that means is that we are now on a cycle where every other year, our folks, even after they've been initially calibrated, are going to come back together. They're going to work with their peers. They're going to, again, build that muscle around good observer practice, and then again, calibrate and assess whether they are accurate in the ratings that they're giving using a pre-scored video. This is another way of looking at it. And what I just wanted to highlight here for folks in terms of this roadmap is, one, when folks are on our, at the start here, and they're on this journey toward becoming a qualified observer, if someone is not successful the first time they assess, we don't just put another video in front of them. Instead, after that initial 3-day training and assessment, if they were not successful, they have small group work. And they have the opportunity then to assess with a different set of videos. If they were still not to be successful, they're now going into very personalized one-on-one support. And so again, we're not just like we wouldn't for our students, not just assessing until we hope somebody gets to the answer correctly. We're focusing on the learning and the muscle building. And so we have those individualized supports and that plan in place and the resources to support it. You then see, so someone would become a qualified observer, they're in that blue bubble. And again, before, that's kind of where their journey with us ended. And what I'm very excited to say again is that our pilot last year, now we're implementing this, district-wide, where folks are in cohorts, and every other year they're going to come back to us for this continuing professional learning. We've had we will have 3 cohorts by the end of this year. There are some folks where if they've been invited, there may have been scheduling conflicts, and so they are then shifted to the next cohort. But folks have a year to work with us. And again, what you're going to see is that through these numbers, we're on track where we have over 400 qualified observers in the district. And again, they're going to be working with us on a cycle to support them through this. Survey responses have been very positive, and we're reflecting on feedback, and we'll continue to iterate to improve the learning experience for our leaders. Here's some preliminary feedback, and the surveys are actually still open, so some of these numbers will shift. But again, what I wanted to highlight, there's some quotes there on the screen. I'm only going to read one of them for you, but again, this is hearing directly from our participants, where folks had said, my new learning helped me to provide specific actual feedback. It's allowed me to have a better understanding of the expectations of the evidence needed to rate teachers. And that's really what we're looking for. We hear from teachers, we see in research that the way the qualified observer conducts the observation builds buy-in and trust in the observation. And the quality of the feedback is really where we're going to try to see that improvement in teacher practice, or that continuation of really strong teacher practice that's being affirmed by the observer's evidence. And again, what we were seeing here, just like very high responses, where 100% of folks are agreeing after the session, strongly agreeing or agreeing that it's relevant, it's well organized, and it provides engagement and reflection. The next thing I'm excited to share, again, not a place of consistency. Here's a place of, real opportunity for improvement. As I'd mentioned, my team supports the implementation and the design work for all employee evaluations. And we are really leaning into some work that is needed and has been needed for a bit around our district office evaluations and folks who support schools from different seats outside of those of teacher or school leader. Our forms and rubrics are out of date. They predate many of my colleagues and myself in most cases. Language and expectations vary significantly. We have different numbers of ratings, different nomenclature, again, different expectations on the forms and the rubrics, maybe similar expectations talked about in slightly different ways, which is really confusing when trying as an organization to name these are our expectations and for a supervisor to say, here's what I'm saying is expectation, how I'm going to support my team. And also the ratings are out of alignment with GCORA. And so in our administrative regulation, we named, a direction of heading toward 4 evaluation ratings, what they are and the definitions for them. And those are included in the appendix. And the last thing I'll name, and maybe even more important, we could do all the work around rubrics and forms and again, wording. And if we're not supporting and coupling that with training for evaluators and materials and resources for folks being evaluated, we don't really get to see that true opportunity where we have distinguished performance, we have talked about and reinforced expectations, and we are supporting people and furthering their development so that we are each working better from our seat to support kids. And so we know that there's more work to be done around that support and training. This is not 1 year's work. We are looking at this certainly over several years and to kind of map out for you where we're going and honestly where we've been. Last year, we really more formally worked with an outside consultant to gather feedback from folks in district office across different roles, seats, and teams. Using feedback survey and then focus groups, and we received a synthesis of that feedback from the consultant. This year, we've been really leaning into discussions around design concept. We are about to embark upon in the next couple of weeks a pilot of a 360 feedback survey that I'm going to talk about a little bit more. And by the end of this year, we're going to be establishing a work group to take us into the summer and really help us start thinking about how we're designing a rubric that can be used and can be authentic for folks in different offices. But what that lets you know as we look ahead, so next year, really getting into the rubric development and piloting. So that for school year 24-25, there will be at least some of our district office staff who will have a different evaluation that they experience. The last thing I wanted to call out, and I'm going to name it a little bit more in an upcoming slide, is that in school year 24 and 25 as well, there's going to be a new electronic evaluation system. So in addition to the updates around rubric language for our district office folks and other school support people, there's also going to be a shift in the electronic platform. So a lot of things that we're thinking about how we're going to help our folks through when it comes to change management. This goes a little bit deeper into the work this year. What I mainly want to name here is that we are looking at, again, how we can redesign the evaluations. And we've really been thinking about rather than by union or, a particular job title, which again might create, 17, 20 different forms that we're then asking some supervisors to be able to use with proficiency in ways that are meaningful for feedback and expectation setting with their teams. Rather thinking about, well, what is unique about how we would evaluate someone who manages others, a people manager, and what is, what is it that we want to make sure is included for any team member, who is leading from their seat here at district office and supporting our schools. And then again, the 360 feedback survey that we're going to work on. This is our work with an outside partner. We're going to be piloting the survey this year. We have the opportunity for a field test next year to be used more broadly. But we're very, very excited. This is in alignment with a valid survey that our school leaders use. And I think it's going to offer really unique and critical performance data around our people managers. So why do this, right? Why is this one of our first steps and the big step for this year really for us? What we know is that people managers serve a critical role in the district. They are critical for the retention and job satisfaction of other team members and for the efficiency and impact of the work that comes out of their teams. And so we need to be able to support them and understand their performance and their impact. So a 360 feedback survey means that with the people manager, that person at the center, they're going to be reflecting using a survey on their own practices when it comes to how they support their team. They're going to get feedback from their supervisor specific on how they support their team. And something I think that is incredibly valuable is they're going to get feedback from their direct reports. Their team members themselves are going to say, here's how you're doing as you support me based on my experience. We've been doing this through the Valid Survey for Principals since school year 13-14. We are very strong in our implementation of that survey, and we're going to take our lessons learned there. We have heard in the feedback last year that district office staff felt like evaluations are too one direction. There's an opportunity here for feedback and valuable performance data be coming from multiple sources. And this is a area of priority for leadership where senior leadership, including union partners, have talked about their interest and the value they place on this type of feedback. The last thing that I want to say here is just for the performance management system, as you are, I would say, probably very likely aware, there's the Administrative Modernization Project, AMP, where we are, updating all of our, ERP systems for human capital, OIT, finance. And what we found was with the vendor there, what they had kind of out of the box for performance management doesn't meet the unique needs of our district, and really were designed more for a different type of corporate setting than the way in which education evaluations operate. And so we're in the midst of identifying a vendor, very, very close to getting to that close of the end of the RFI, where we identify the vendor and get under contract, knowing that we will then be working to have all of our employee evaluations shift into this new platform for 24-25. So we'll certainly have updates next year around our progress. And then I don't want to be a liar. I believe this is almost my last slide. I just want to name there's a lot of training that we understand folks are going to need. It's going to be technical, how you understand and use new rubrics, how you understand and use a new performance management system, the buttons to click, the way it looks and feels, how you log in. And then I think even more importantly is that adaptive space, right? We need to make sure when I talked about how important people managers are, that translates into the way they are equipped to sit in evaluation and performance conversations. Are they able to talk about performance and expectations? Are they able to hold people to them? Are they able to support people to meeting them? Helping our team members through change, because again, change is challenging, especially if it feels like loss or there's a lot of fear that might be involved. We have to make sure we're working with our partners and supporting our folks through that. And again, thinking about how we are norming that push we have around qualified observers that I talked about and that continuing calibration to increase the consistency and the trust in observations. We need that to also sit at district office, or at least something that's appropriately similar, so that we are building the muscle for our evaluators and people managers and building the trust and buy-in of the folks being evaluated and strengthening the type of support and feedback they're receiving. And the last thing I'll say is actually, I want to say almost the same slide as last year. There's some language in the Kerwin legislation around teacher evaluations. We have not received any guidance from MSDE or from AIB. I understand there are many, many things that are changing because of Kerwin. And so this is, on the list in terms of our need for guidance and clarity so that we understand what the implications might be and what it could mean for our work around our teacher evaluation. When we know more, we will certainly make sure we're providing an update. And that's our update to the board. So again, thank you so much. Are there any questions that I can help with?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll open the floor, Commissioner Coy.
Yeah, two questions, and I do appreciate the enormity of the work that you're outlining here and how it fits into the larger systems with AMP, with the modernization project. Currently, you talked about the performance management system coming online. Can you just describe to me a little bit of currently how an individual teacher or a non-instructional employee would see or access their observational data and evaluation data? Like how is that currently being provided to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, in our current Oracle business solution, we have all of our employee evaluations are built electronically. I will say that in the past, there were different systems and some were kind of homegrown, and Prior to the pandemic, we had finished the work with our partners in OIT to transition everybody into Oracle. So all the forms are there. The way that Oracle works in its functionality is that forms start with the evaluator. Information is entered electronically. It is transferred electronically to the employee. They can view it. They can add attachments. They can add comments. They can't change what's already been entered. And then they can send it back to the evaluator. Sometimes it stays with the employee, like it may stay in a bit of flux, and then the system will close and no more changes can be made. And then what happens is that everything that has been completed, filled in and shared becomes available in a section of ERP that's called the completed appraisals. So folks can go back, and as long as it was entered electronically, they have access to that. I will say that and that's true for everybody, I'd say by employee group, I expect that the practice, and I've heard anecdotally, the practice is for some employee groups, it's more of the supervisor is sitting down reviewing it. It still goes in the electronic system for the record, and we need it for compensation. But they might still have more of that hard copy type conversation. For others, it may be completely electronic, but it exists for everybody. And only what is in the electronic system is what we use for compensation updates and things of that nature.
Commissioner Core, if you would allow me just to supplement a tiny bit of what Jesse said. The current process is very, very cumbersome and very intensive and labor intensive. And part of what we're trying to do with the new AMP project is to streamline all of that. The problem with all of that is we're finding the complexity of getting that done. It's not as simple as we would like it to be. So it's causing quite a bit of consternation for our future plans as we're assessing these things and trying to address it. But it is, as Jesse explained, it's very cumbersome. OIT have tried to help streamline it, but truthfully, hasn't been a great job. So hopefully we'll do much better in the new project as we look for the right tools.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful for me to understand more fully. My second question does relate to one of the employee subgroups. I recall in a previous presentation, I don't recall exactly which committee, I think it was this committee, but I don't recall when it was. There was a discussion about the evaluation reports and you sort of referenced it, the different options, that they are different among different groups. And as I recall, the school police did not have a meaningful scale on which the employee evaluations occurred. There were only two options. And I guess my question is, how is that being considered currently, given that what you're outlining here, and that two options doesn't seem either a best practice or helpful in the evaluation process,
Yeah, no, Commissioner Coyle, absolutely. And I would offer our school police are not the only people who still have a bifurcated rating system, which it's incredibly unhelpful. It's generally, so the options are satisfactory and unsatisfactory. There's no way to say who's performing any higher, right, than like kind of meeting expectation. And to be unsatisfactory is very, very rare. And so we see we are not able to disaggregate or really kind of differentiate performance in that type of system. And so we are including school police in the district office work, as I mentioned. We've reached out to each of our bargaining unit partners so that, we want to be as collaborative as we can be, especially thinking around change management and training. But I mean, you're exactly right. We have folks here, school police and other Pizzazza folks actually, where it's sat unsat, and it's just that is not a useful way of evaluating folks anymore. The forms are very, very outdated and from a different way of evaluating. And we have some forms with 5 rating tiers, and all the language is different. So I don't know if I'm fully answering your question, but to get at it, yes. And because of those differences in rating and some of them being very challenging to use to really distinguish folks and like even differentiate like who might not be all the way unsatisfactory, but developing and needing more support. That is one of the reasons behind the work. And we are trying to do it in a way that is comprehensive of all of our employees here.
Yeah, no, I think you've answered enough of my question. I can follow up offline with any follow-up that is more particular, but I appreciate that insight about the current status and that it's on sort of encompassed in what you are saying about the need to be revisited and more consistent across the district.
Commissioner Reed.
Jesse, thank you very much. Thank you for the initiating the evaluation for district-based staff and also the 360 feedback process. I mean, I think it's great. And if we could get that for everybody, it would be pretty good too. I guess the biggest problem I've had for a while is a dichotomy. The dichotomy I have is most of the teachers are highly effective. Their ratings are highly effective. Conversely, the students are doing poorly in terms of tests, grades, attendance, and graduation. So you have one group that's being rated well, but their product, which are the students, are not doing well. So how do we create a rubric where these factors are involved in their evaluation through the system? I mean, the whole system should have a poor grade because the kids are having a poor grade. The kids are our product. So why is everybody having a great grade when the kids aren't doing well? So how do we get that in an evaluation?
Commissioner Reed, that's the question. That's the question.
Yeah.
Because I've been fighting with this for 5 years now. It's like, it's all about the kids, but everybody's getting good grades. So how does that work?
Yeah, Commissioner Reed, I appreciate what you've brought into this space and Commissioner Roberts' reaction as well. First and foremost, because you're centering our students, and that has to, like, that is why we are here. It is absolutely a challenge, and it is multifaceted. And I will offer, it is multifaceted. In our state, we actually have some of the most differentiation in teacher evaluation ratings based on the data we have available from MSDE. And it is still not, I would say, as it is still too much of a ski slope that we have seen and like that the nation saw before a lot of reform around teacher evaluations occurred. It is not as steep, but it is still, we are still looking like this, and more so than we have for our school leaders, for example, which look more like a bell curve. As an LEA system, we actually do have more differentiation than many of our peers, and some of that is because of our use of the developing rating category. So we actually are using 4, and we see people being rated as developing more so than in other systems. That does not absolve us of the work and what you are naming. There are some places in which student data is included in teacher evaluations, and we are often navigating guidance and consideration with our partners at the district office and our teacher level partners around, what is fair? Like, how do you balance a rigorous goal for students and something that feels like it remains fair and appropriate for the people who are working with them day in and day out? And we're often reminded of some of the contextual factors that are outside of a teacher's immediate control, but which are influencing the learning of our students. And so it is very complex. And there are some places in which we have the opportunity to lean more into quantitative data about how our kids are doing, being part of what we are each holding as an adult. There's a measure, school performance measure, that I will offer is very contentious. And as soon as we start to have performance data available in it again, there will be conversations about it. I would assume all the way up to the board, and there's a lot of debate about how appropriate it is to include a school-wide measure about an individual's performance. We've historically held that every person in the building is influencing that data to some degree. And that is another way in which COVID kind of disrupted the availability of that data, which is a more quantifiable measure of what our kids are, how we're measuring how our kids are doing. And we haven't included that data in our teacher or school leaders evaluation for the last couple of years, but we could again moving forward. So those are some things that come to mind for me with your question. And I really appreciate the push because you're centering our kids. Do you feel like there were gaps in my response that you'd want to make sure I addressed or I spoke to?
I guess when the evaluation's done, it tends to be top-down driven. Maybe it should be a balance where it's bottom-up also. because bottom up was like what's happening on the grassroots level. Like you said, when we look at a kid, it's not fair to say the teacher's to blame because we have families, we have economic situations, we have transportation, we have community situations. So I would not just blame the teacher or the principal or district. But the point is, even though we had COVID, I've been on the board pre-COVID, and people are still being evaluated since I've been on the board, but there's been no improvement. I mean, even if we X'd out COVID, it would still be a flat line. So that's my point. It's like there's no improvement in one end, and still people are still being high rated almost through the system. Almost everybody's highly effective.
Yeah. I appreciate Commissioner Reed. When you say bottom up, what comes to mind for me are some of the models in which there's student surveys or like there's other ways in the same way for 360, we're hearing from direct reports. I know that at one point we had considered that as a district and there were some infrastructure pieces that weren't in place. But I will certainly take your feedback back to the team, just in terms of our continuing to think about the ways in which we're reflecting student data and the different types of student data that might be available to us.
And also keep in mind that I'm one of 12 to 14 people in terms of the commissioners. So my perspective cannot be considered the same perspective as other commissioners. So everybody has their own place and seat and ideas.
In alignment. Roberts is in alignment. Thank you so much for the presentation
Yes,
and for
thank
the
you.
robust discussion.
Yes, thank you so much for the time and opportunity and the questions.
I believe Dewana is on representing the board today.
I am on.
Dewana, wonderful. Is there anyone signed up for public comment this morning?
There is no one signed up for public comment, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you so much. We will move forward with the procurement agenda.
How much time do we have, Madam Chair?
We have a little bit of time. What is it that you need, Commissioner?
No, I just wonder whether we finish by 12:30. I don't know if it's a hard stop or not. Okay.
I think based off of the discussion around these items, we could realistically be done by 12.
No, thank you. All right.
Good morning, Operations Committee. We have 14 procurement items for consideration. The first is 13.1 Schmidt Baking Company, Inc. The Chief Financial Officer requests the board's approval to contract with Schmidt Baking Company to procure various bread products for city schools cafeterias for the breakfast and lunch program. The estimated total contract amount is $3 million. The contract term is July 1, 2023 through July 31st, 2025.
Are there any questions around this item?
Yeah, just one for me. That's why I asked about the timeline. I guess one for me is, what do we mean by piggyback? Okay, Baltimore County's piggyback wasn't as good as Frederick County's piggyback. So what are we talking about here?
You want to know why we're piggybacking or what a piggyback is?
Well, no, a piggyback is basically leveraging relationship.
Right.
But it basically read that we're going to Frederick County's piggyback because it was better than Baltimore County's piggyback. So what are we talking about?
Right, from a cost perspective. So think about it in terms of the district size. Baltimore County has a bigger district than Frederick, so their pricing is going to be better. So we have to select the contract that is that has the best cost benefit for us. And this is typically the contract that we select because we talk to the LEAs before they put out their solicitations. So they know that Baltimore City or Anne Arundel County, they utilize our numbers when they solicit for the services.
Okay. But Baltimore County is bigger than Frederick, but we're using Frederick, right?
No, I thought. Oh.
right?
Well, maybe I had it backwards. I'm sorry. When compared to Baltimore County Public Schools agreement. So what I can send you is, my apologies for that. What I can send you is the price analysis that we do to compare. So you'll have that. I don't have it in front of me,
Thank you.
but that was a good question. My apologies on that.
And I see Chris.
Thanks, Commissioner Reed. Chris Doherty from the Finance Office. I was just going to add, and right, that I think Director Matthews just got the two counties mixed up. But
I did.
what we do know and is we're constantly shopping for better contracts and the piggybacks. And I know your question is a specific one about the Schmidt Baking Company, but I wanted to add we do. What's the right way to say this? We're bargain conscious shoppers, and when we see a piggyback that is better than we're either doing or better than we think we can get, we do energetically piggyback on other contracts. And I think by design, and we think it's a good idea. And one of the reasons we like it is, of course, a piggyback. You can piggyback off of a competitively solicited grant, right? Like let's say a county does a sole source, right? It just picks someone. You can't piggyback off that. You're benefiting from the free and open process that very frequently, not always, but very frequently results in a good low bidder. And then for as long as the term of that contract, you've got those nice prices, and with bread, I mean, not all bread is created equal, certainly, but it's pretty similar. So you definitely want to get a good price. And so in this case, yes, Frederick's smaller, but sometimes the smaller counties, they get a better deal, and then we pick those. I just hope I hope that you see that context, and that we're bargain conscious shoppers that are basically doing the procurement version of like best deal guarantee. Like you go into Best Buy and you show them the clipping from this thing and they'll match that best price. That's kind of a version of what we're doing here. And especially for the pretty big items, like we buy a lot of bread, it really pays off. So I don't know that we do more piggybacks than others, but I think we do, because we see their value and we go through the process. It's not nothing. I mean, it's not like clicking a button, but it's a real lever that procurement can pull on behalf of the offices to get good deals that sometimes last for a good period of time as well.
And it may be helpful from your seat in your groups to have the public learn more about piggybacking from the standpoint to see that there isn't as much waste in terms of spending in the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, people say there's waste all over the place, but piggybacking is a good situation where you show that you're trying to be effective.
Absolutely. And food costs have gone up quite a bit. I know Director Marquetta is dealing, and I wasn't asking for her to join, but she and her team have been managing extremely well. The food input costs are really going way, way up. And of course, our USDA meal reimbursement rate, not so flexible. And so, Ms. Marquetta, do you want to either clarify or add to anything that's been said? If the commissioners want.
No, I mean, there are some, piggybacking contracts that we do have. Again, bread is bread, I will say, we do get whole grain rich items, and we're able to get items without high fructose corn syrup from this local vendor. So, we have been satisfied with them in the past, but this is, yes, a piggybacking contract. I can't add anything there, but I can speak to any other questions about the specific vendor or items.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, team.
Okay, next item is 13.2, McKinnon, Shelton, and Henn. The Chief Financial Officer requests the board's approval to contract with the law firm of McKinnon, Shelton, and Henn to assist city schools with legal services to include debt issuance and voluntary closing agreement program VCAP submission to the IRS. The estimated annual amount of the contract is $150,000. The contract term is May 24th, 2023 through June 30th, 2026, or when all funds have been expended.
Any question? Okay, we can move on to the next item.
Okay, 13.3, ADP Inc. The Chief Financial Officer requests the board's approval to contract with ADP Inc. to continue with ADP's employment tax services. The estimated annual contract amount is $85,000. The contract term is May 24th, 2023 through April 30th, 2024, with 2 one-year renewal options.
Thank you. Any questions?
15.1, Autumn Contracting, Inc. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Autumn Contracting, Inc. in the total amount of $3,799,400 to provide roof replacement services at the William S. Beard School located in the Coldstream Park Building 31.
Any questions? No? Okay.
15.2, Allstate Contractor, Inc. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Allstate Contractor, Inc. in the total amount of $1,334,827 to provide roof replacement services at Windsor Hill Pre-K through 8 School number 87.
Any questions? No? Okay, we can move forward.
Okay, 15.3, Clyde McHenry, Inc. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Clyde McHenry, Inc. in the total amount of $1,081,391 to provide window and door replacement services at Cecil Elementary School number 7.
Any questions? No? Okay.
Okay. 15.4, Smolin Emer Ilkovich. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval to increase the total contract amount with SIE Architects, Inc. from $962,486 to $1,412,486, an overall increase of $450,000 to provide additional A&E services for the construction of the new annex building at Marie G. Faring Pre-K to 8 School number 203.
Any questions? No? Okay.
15.5, the Driven Group. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval to increase the contract with the Driven Group from $5,285,000 to $6,385,000, an increase of $1.1 million, and extend the contract term through August 31st, 2023 to continue to provide expanded school bus transportation services to city school students.
Sherry?
I guess my question is this like a niche relationship? Because I'm looking at this as $6 million. What do they provide that's unique? And then because it's tied in with the next procurement item, which is 1506, and I'm just wondering what's unique about Driven. Then I can ask my questions about the other one when we get to it.
So your Driven Group is not unique. It is just one of our contractors, the yellow bus contractors that provide athletics, cultural trips, as well as getting school children to and from school. With the absence of another contractor, they have provided additional services this year to ensure our students are able to participate in athletics and cultural trips. Therefore, we need additional spending power.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question that I had on this one, and I appreciated the table that broke down sort of the history of the contract. That was not something I see as often, but I absolutely appreciated it. Just help me understand one or two of those pieces there. When it outlined a CFO approval, I imagine the original contract sort of contemplated that, or help me understand, like, I guess what is the what's the threshold for for something that isn't going through board approved increase,
Mhm.
just for my edification and understanding.
So I have the authority to increase a contract up to $50,000. And the CFO has authorization to increase it another 50, so $100,000 total without board approval. Anything above that, we have to come back to the board.
So any board contract doesn't, regardless of how much it was, has that's the threshold for that.
Correct.
50,000 and then 50,000.
Yes, yeah.
I appreciate
And-
that additional understanding.
Commissioner Coy, I think state law gives them up to $100,000, and we divided it up that way, I believe.
Correct. Any additional questions?
Not on that one, no.
Section 15.6, school bus transportation. The chief operating officer requests the board's approval to increase the school bus transportation contract with multiple awardees from $51,573,312.40 to $53,774,000, an increase of $2,200,687.60, and extend the contract term through August 31st, 2023 to continue to provide bus transportation services.
Did you have a follow-up question, Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, I guess in terms of just proper planning for the fall, are there any gaps, concerns, inefficiencies, or complaints that need to be addressed over the summer so we'll be okay during the fall in terms of the whole transportation system?
That for me to answer?
It could be, I know it's above my pay grade, but.
Okay, so basically we are negotiating with our contractors, so it is a year for a contract. So this is to ensure that we have enough funds to pay for ESY and summer school enrichment activities that require yellow bus transportation.
No, I'm not looking now. I'm just asking you and Lynette, maybe Lynette can help me in terms of, we got to make sure next year's great. So what happened? Anything broke, didn't work during this school year or through the summer that can be mitigated, that we can be pretty effectual on the out years?
Yeah, so I think that what Jacinta was speaking about was the summer, but in terms of starting for the new school year, we don't have any flags right now. So usually when we are dealing with bus driver shortages and a number of those different things, I think that the only thing that we are working through right now is we're going through a negotiation around the contract, the transportation contract. And so we are working with our procurement office. We're looking at bids and some of those different things. But as of right now, we don't foresee a significant driver shortage. There were a lot of things that were beneficial that happened last year, such as the Bell study changes that allowed us to use buses more efficiently. So I would say that right now we don't have a flag for the board, but as we move through the contract negotiation and we prepare, which is what we're doing right now, we're starting to prepare and look towards the next school year, we'll definitely surface those flags, but we don't have any right now.
Thank you.
Really quickly, Chief Washington, you mentioned the new contract and it's also listed in the board letter. When can we anticipate that coming to us?
So I would have to circle back with our team because we're still looking at the contract. Yeah, we're still reviewing the contract and the responses to the bids.
I only bring that up, one, because it's mentioned in the board letter, but also it helps to kind of address the full picture of services and supports for the students that are utilizing the transportation.
Yes. And so I will say that what we're focusing on right now is to make sure that we have the services through the summer, right? And then as we continue to review the responses from the bids that we put out, right, then we'll be able to have a response of what we do moving forward.
Helpful, Commissioner Reed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you so much, Jacinta.
Okay, next item is 18.1, Rollins, Smalkin, Richards, and Mackey. The chief legal officer requests the board's approval to increase the contract amount and extend the term date with outside counsel at Rollins, Smalkin, Richards, and Mackey LLC to continue to provide conflict counsel to city schools. The board is requested to approve a contract extension through June 30th, 2024, as well as increase the estimated total contract amount from $47,000 to $125,000, an increase of $78,000.
Questions?
Yeah, just this is more of a broad, perhaps, because there's the three legal items here, or for outside counsel that are in this. I also recall it couldn't have been more than 4 months ago that there was also sort of a set of some legal counsel. So if there's any, I guess, just overview, the individuals all are fairly small numbers, right? These are not sort of incredibly large contracts as some of the other ones that we're discussing here. But I'm curious if there's ability just to describe the overall kind of differences or nature of these different contracts and the benefits for different organizations being contracted.
Sure. So I can jump in. My name is Rebecca Burney. I am the interim special assistant to the chief legal officer. So he's actually out at a funeral today, but can follow up if you have any additional questions that I cannot answer. But in general, the challenge has been in our office. We've had some staffing shortages, particularly around our work regarding EEO. So employees that raise discrimination claims and things like that. The staff in our office who would typically handle these requests or responses or litigation, they are no longer with city schools. So we had people from our team leave this year. We've been working hard to fill those vacancies, but until we're able to find additional lawyers in our office to handle these types of cases, we have had to rely on outside counsel to assist with some investigations and responding to, civil rights complaints and things like that. So the influx has really been due to staffing challenges in legal currently. Is that helpful?
No, that does provide helpful context and some of that insight. Thank you.
Jill, move forward.
Okay. Let's see, Shaw. Section 18.2, the chief legal officer requests the board's approval to increase the contract amount and extend the term date with outside counsel at Shaw Rosenthal LLP to continue to provide legal representation and services to city schools. The board is requested to approve a contract extension through December 31st, 2023, as well as increase the estimated total contract amount from $250,000 to $400,000, an increase of $150,000.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Commissioner Coy? No, Commissioner Reed? Okay.
Okay. Section 18.3, Jackson Lewis, PC. The chief legal officer requests the board's approval to enter into a new contract with outside counsel at Jackson Lewis, PC. The law firm is continuing to provide legal representation and services in personnel and other related matters as may be assigned by the chief legal officer. The estimated total contract amount is $150,000. The contract term is January 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, or when all funds have been expended.
Question? All right, we can move forward.
Section 19.1, Johns Hopkins University. The Chief of Schools requests the board's approval of a contract with the Johns Hopkins University to provide a registered nurse assigned full-time to the Rails Health Center, a school-based health center located at Kip Harmony Academy, number 347, operated by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. The estimated total contract amount is $350,659.50. The contract term is July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2025.
Any questions? I'm going to read.
Okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Roberts, you said no questions?
Oh, no, no questions. We can move
Oh,
forward.
okay. Okay, thank you. Section 20.1, Community Schools. The Chief Communications and Community Engagement Officer requests the board's approval to contract with 13 vendors to provide community schools lead agency services. The estimated total amount of the contract is $45,375,000. The contract term is May 24th, 2023 through June 30th, 2026, and includes 2 one-year renewal options to be exercised at the sole discretion of city schools.
Sherry.
So this is costing us about $15 million a year. My question is, how do we gauge the return on investment? 1, and 2, there are 13 institutions being utilized. Do we, over time, over that 3-year period, discern best in class and say, hey, 3 years after this project's over, we want 6 of these schools and we want to drop 7, or how does that work out in terms of working out the best in class and also the return on investment?
Can I jump in?
I think she's
you're-
frozen.
I think you're frozen, but we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. So the first off, I'll go to your second question first, and then I also have Holly Gonzalez here who can jump in and help if there needs to be questions. The way this works is it's not a best in class kind of thing. We have a capacity issue right now. We're going to have 149 schools that are community schools. We have lead agencies that have gone through the vetting process and have been determined to be quality, both financially and with programmatic operation to execute being lead agencies at those community schools. So it's on, we filtered some out, for example. We had more as part of the RFP process. Some of them that were in it before are not in it any longer, or some who wanted to be new in the strategy are not part of this RFP because they did not pass muster, if you will. And so it's not really a best in class. It is a good partner who knows the community, can work with the school to support the implementation of the community school strategy as we outlined in the contract and as we have through our best practice and things we've been outlined in our policy that you all voted on a few months ago. In addition to that, in the contract, there are expectations for what these agencies are supposed to do to support the community schools in terms of evaluation, reporting, et cetera, that we will be monitoring regularly to make sure that they are following through with those expectations of the community school strategy. But this is just a reminder of the 149 that are CPG schools that we're going through with the lead agencies. Several of them will also stay with the district. So schools have an option to either choose one of these lead agencies that are in this RFP or choose the district as the lead agency sponsor, if you will, to operate their community school. And it's based on the school's individual needs and their way that they want to operate their community school strategy.
Commissioner Reed?
So you can say they can make an option. So 149 schools, 13 agencies, they can decide whether to use one of these agencies or use district.
That's right.
Okay, and that's their choice. And who pays for the agency? They pay for the agency or district pays for the agency?
The CPG dollars are allocated to each school.
Okay.
They have to use the dollars to hire a coordinator. Those dollars are the dollars that actually, as part of this contract, will go to the lead agency to pay for the coordinator if they choose the coordinator, or those dollars get allocated to my budget and we pay the staff person accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
McCoy?
Yes, in the table, and I appreciate the table that breaks down the base year and the different years. there is a fairly large variance between some of the different providers, you know, as much as 200% of sort of the low for the high. And I'm hearing in what you're saying that there's the school decision choice that they are selecting, and I imagine, but I'd like to hear, I guess, a little bit more that not all providers are providing the exact same thing, right? That there's a degree of there's a degree to which they are all providing the same thing, but there's differences in how they're doing that. Or could you describe to me, I guess, why there's a difference in the pricing and why that is?
I will give you a very quick overview, then I'm gonna let Holly go deeper into the cost structure. What I will offer you is that different agencies have different numbers of schools they sponsor. So the YMCA, for example, might have 17 schools, whereas, I don't know, Arts for Learning might have 3 schools. So the cost structure is going to be different based on the number of schools that they are partnered with as part of the lead agency. But there was also a bidding process through the RFP. And so Holly, if you want to talk about the cost structure for a minute, I think that'd be really helpful to explain as well.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So as part of the RFP process, we put out a standard scope of work, which included hiring and supporting the community school coordinator, completing the needs assessment and action plan, both of things which are required by the Kerwin legislation, and then participating in professional development and evaluation activities kind of as needed to provide a high quality service. Each organization has different fringe rates. They have different costs. Some of them may have different requirements perhaps in who they hire, like if some may require a higher college degree or level, that can contribute to a higher cost. Through the RFP, what we wanted people to do was propose what their best cost is that was sufficient for them to operate, and then we assess them all individually. So there is indeed a range, but we're very confident in these vendors that they'll be able to provide a high quality service.
Yeah, and in the one table, it is the cost per school, right? Obviously, some of the schools are getting a lot more total because they have a lot more schools. But in that table, you know, it is the per school difference. And what I'm hearing is that the individual schools are selecting, but they have the full insight. They can see all the different ones. And there's a question also, I imagine, about capacity of the different organizations to work. Like there's lots of variables that are in this mix. You know, and I appreciate the transparency that's here to where everybody can see what that is, that it's not a sort of hidden price tag, if you will. And I think that transparency can translate to schools making the decisions that are best for them in their process. But just I guess, elevating and making sure that I'm understanding what this is presenting, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we're done with questions on this item. Commissioner Reed, Commissioner Coy.
I did talk about return on investment, but that takes time anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the broader conversation. Oh.
So I would just offer that we're also, as a side note to this, is conducting a starting evaluation plan for community schools for the district and our lead agencies. So we are in the process of resolving a contract there. It's going to go on through also the next school year. So we'll have a concrete evaluation plan that looks at what is the success, what's the impact, and we be able to report back to the state on the impact of community schools across the district, not by lead agency or by district, but across the strategy. So that is coming. Right now, we have output measurements. We talk about the number of schools that have needs assessments, implementation plans, strategies, hired coordinators, that kind of thing. We're now moving into a next phase where we can really talk about the impact of community school strategy. And that will be overall. And if we notice things, for example, Commissioner Reed, where we have a couple lead agency sponsors that are not doing well with them, that would be a work intervention with Holly's team and other folks to work with that lead agency to understand what's happening and unpack why their data could be different than other data points across the district. It could be the school, it could be a number of factors, but that's the work of the specialists on my team to be able to go in and do those interventions and supports. And then to do, I hate to say it, but like cut the contract if it's not working well, right? We have that opportunity as well. If the route would not be renewed, if we find out that the impact isn't as great or it's being poorly executed or whatever at different lead agencies.
Well, and I do know, obviously, you all have been at this in so many different ways, both in the district and outside the district. Holly, it's wonderful to see you. here in this context. So it's been out there for a long time. I can only imagine that there will be sort of interest from fellow commissioners on this item, and I wonder if there's a way to either outline when and how some of that broader evaluation conversation is happening, or if some of that being provided proactively when this is coming up for the procurement. I can imagine that would be sort of helpful in the board process.
It'll probably be worthwhile at the business meeting as we explore what the calendar will be for next year, and potentially we can couple that with a larger presentation in teaching and learning.
Paula, do you want to quickly talk about the evaluation plan? Just because
Really quickly, we're at time.
yeah,
Let's be respectful of everyone's
and we're
time.
not. It won't be coming before the board because it's under a certain amount of the contract, so that won't be coming before the board. I just want to make sure you know that. Go ahead, Holly. Sorry.
I was just going to say, look out for our annual report and compliance reports because we can put in there a table school by school leverage funds.
You all so much. I'm really trying to stick to our time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And we're there. Thank you all so much for the fruitful, comprehensive presentations of today. Thank you so much for all of the the procurement agenda today and the comprehensive board letters. Thank you so much. We know you all work very hard on them, and we appreciate them because we read them. We look forward to seeing you all at the June 20th meeting. Operations committee meeting. I'm so sorry. I'm really trying to wrap it before 12:15. Okay. You all have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you for your participation. This is end of call.
Thank you.
Everyone.